Vice President, since Trump has taken office, everything that you warned about has happened. Do you sometimes just want to scream, "I told y'all so," and feel free to do it right now? I mean,
Sonny, nothing comes to mind.
So I do want to ask you, because you've not held back your criticisms of President Trump today. Do you think that there's anything he's done right since coming back into office?
Does anything come to mind?
You know, nothing comes to mind.
Nothing. Anna, your question is next.
I can leave it at that, but let me just say that I'm sure there are some things, but the reality is he is destroying our government, our institutions, the principles and values upon which we're founded. I mean, what he has done to attack a free and independent press, free speech, what he has done to attack the people of our country in such a vicious way, I find there are no redeeming qualities.
That's called a double dip. Welcome, everybody, to the program. How are you doing, Matt?
I am in awe of Kamala Harris and
She warned
the media.
us.
It's unbelievable. For folks who were unaware of why that was such a laugh line, why it was such a, and let me actually turn this off, why it was such a gut buster that she said nothing comes to mind. Why is that so funny? Well, she said that on The View last year, where she was asked what she would do differently than Joe Biden. And she said, nothing comes to mind.
By the way, at this point now, like a historically unpopular politician.
And she is, in this book, 10-7 Days, as I like to call it, she says she was unaware that she had pulled the pin on a hand grenade when she answered it that way. And now she's making jokes about it. Like, one of them, it's amazing how profoundly unserious she is in a profoundly unserious party led by people like Schumer and Jeffries. But, like, goodness gracious. We're going to go deep into that in the post game. I was just going to record the first, like, couple minutes of her and Maddow's discussion. I ended up recording like 5 minutes and getting on late with David because I just couldn't stop watching it.
Well, patrons, you will be the beneficiary of that obsession over at the post game at patreon.com/leftreckoning. Reminder that we're doing things a little differently now. So it's just one continuous stream. You'll have the link in the Patreon ad-free, the whole thing, and then we start immediately after saying goodbye to all of the freeloaders over here. But we do love everybody who's out here watching this program, and this is a big fat one. We're going to get into a lot of good stuff today. We're going to be talking a little bit about what people do like in just a second, and also what happened in the United Kingdom. But Matt, tell everyone about the conversation that you hosted.
Yeah, Devin O'Shea, who's been doing these great TikToks on, who's a writer based in St. Louis, been doing these great TikToks on my favorite author, Thomas Pynchon, who we'll get into why in the interview, why guys, literary leftists like Pynchon. But there's a new movie coming out by Paul Thomas Anderson starring Tiana Taylor and Leonardo DiCaprio called One Battle After Another. And it's loosely based on the book Vineland, which came out in 1990. Now, the characters aren't the same names in this movie, so I'm not sure how closely the movie will follow the book, but I will say there might be spoilers. There definitely is spoilers of the book where we have a conversation that's pretty open about what happens with some of the characters. So if you don't want a book from 1990 spoiled, or possibly this upcoming film at all spoiled, you might want to avoid this. But I would say just, it's good context.
What are you talking about, man?
Anyway.
No one should avoid this. This is important stuff to be watching.
You know me. I am not for spoilers. I think that's sort of like capitalist propaganda about how art is supposed to be consumed, and that just is alien from the way I actually participate in media. But some people are pretty precious about it.
Watch the whole video, as the TikTok says. Watch till the end. Yeah, exactly. No, you're totally right. To imagine that like you can't enjoy a piece of art or something like that just because you know how it ends. I don't know. Would kind of like knock out a tremendous amount of very famous and important works, as well as pretty much every historical film ever made.
I finally watched Get Out, and I knew pretty much exactly what that was going on there. Still, worth a viewing.
Well, folks, we got a lot to get to today, so we won't dilly-dally too much at the top. Before we get into that conversation, I did want to talk a little bit about something that people do like, and that is democratic socialism. I mean, this is something that I think is really important for our side to remember, is that our ideas and our movement is extremely popular. And the questions that we have in front of us are more so about how we can kind of utilize that popularity to build organizations that have the long-term ability to win for everyday folks. And there's this new poll that, again, proves just how popular these things are and really throws a wrench in a lot of the arguments that we're getting from the right wing of the Democratic Party about what that organization needs to do in the upcoming midterms. This poll was done by Data for Progress, the DSA Fund, and Jacobin Magazine, along with the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. And yeah, you can see this is just part of it, looking at just results based on the races of voters. The economic system is rigged. 42% of white voters agreed, 47% Latino, 68% Black, agreed with that. Democrat versus Democratic Socialist. Democratic Socialist was much more popular with Black and Latino voters. And capitalism versus Democratic Socialism was much more popular political system with Latinos and Black people than it was with whites. And we can pull that down. But that's not the only kind of stark difference that we saw when it comes to everyday people and how they are reacting and thinking about things like democratic socialism. We saw 70% of all respondents in this poll agree that the economic system is rigged in favor of corporations and the wealthy and needs to be replaced. This is, by the way, including Republicans. 58% of Republicans agreed with that statement. 59% of respondents and 58% of Republicans blame landlords and banks more than government regulation for the high cost of housing. That's kind of interesting given some of the rhetoric we've been hearing over the past few months, right, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I mean, we can go through all these because I think they're very interesting. 83% of respondents agree that social work and mental health are necessary parts of a public safety budget. This includes 81% of independents and 80% of Republicans. We can get into some of the specifics about the differences amongst Democratic Party voters and likely Democrat voters when it comes to things like their consideration of democratic socialism. But I think that first, before we get there, it's really notable the fact that you're seeing that this is across party lines. These kind of political messaging, how much that resonates with everyday folks. This idea that like you can't talk to people because you might be organizing in like a red state or something like that. That's just fundamentally not true. Now, organizations like the Democratic Party have done plenty of work over the past few decades to discredit themselves in the eyes of many an American voter. That should not create a lack of confidence in people who are advocating and fighting for democratic socialism. And look, this is an interesting poll because it shows again the way that things are moving. But this is something that we've been seeing time and time again, that people are fed up with the political system that we're under, and they're looking for different kinds of answers. And when you talk about the big issues, the economic issues, economic populism, that resonates with people because that is the everyday experience of folks. They realize that this is a country that is designed to benefit those at the very top. This is not a system that has been designed to help everyday people get ahead. It is a system that is designed to keep them down so that people at the top can continue to profit. And this is something that is felt viscerally from places like New York to places like Oklahoma. And understanding this and having some confidence when you go out there and talk to people, when you strategize and when you think about building a political organization that can win is absolutely critical. And yeah, I mean, I want to throw to you, Matt, to talk a little bit about that specific, about Republicans and independents, how, compelling the Democratic Socialist argument is to them before we get into the Democratic Party stuff.
it's never been, I mean, my personal experience is, I have one side of my family that's from the town in North Dakota, fairly Catholic Republican, pretty through and through. And the other side of my family, my mom's side.
Okay. It seems like Matt's having tech issues. On the point of the Democratic Party, the Democrats prefer democratic socialism to capitalism by 58% margin. Socialism is also extremely popular with younger voters. Democrats prefer left-wing political figures like AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Zoran by a large margin. And this is something that's also interesting given what Matt was just talking about. You talk about things like democratic socialist politicians like AOC and Bernie Sanders, and look at how popular they are, even amongst groups that are oftentimes written off by the Democratic Party. Places where Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not popular, you are seeing a lot of excitement around people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, right? Like you see this Latinos prefer Democratic Socialist leaders over Democratic Party leaders like Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, et cetera. 59% to 29% in favor of, again, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Zoran's wing of the party. Rural voters, something that the Democrats have completely lost any ability to be competitive in rural America. This is like one of the major stories of American politics over the past few decades. It's 37 to 29% in favor of, preferring Democratic Socialist candidates, right? That's a huge margin there. That is showing that unlike the argument that we get from people like Matt Iglesias, unlike the argument that we're getting from all of these kind of AstroTurf think tanks that are coming up after the historic loss that the Democrats faced in 2024, Democratic socialism is incredibly popular and actually shows the path out for the Democratic Party, doubling down on the conservative wing of the Democratic Party that has just been soundly rejected over the past 3 decades all across the nation, is a path to continued irrelevance and strength and power for the far right of this country. You see these similar kind of things play out amongst working class voters and voters without college degrees. Again, the democratic socialist model, the economic populist model, is the popular position in politics in this country. And anyone who's continuing to push this idea that what we need to do is push reactionary candidates who are pro-business, pro-Wall Street, is absolutely full of it. And this poll that we're seeing is just another example, and it's another thing that should give you a tremendous confidence that our movement has the wind in its sails, and the only thing that can stop us is failure to grab the moment and organize properly. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with the United Kingdom and the unfortunate example there with your party in just a second. I did want to highlight before we go over to this conversation about Pynchon that Matt and I will be doing an event to help people regarding DSA. I will put that up. It is in the show notes. We will be speaking and helping make phone calls to encourage people to sign up for solidarity dues with the DSA. I'll put that in the chat. It is in the show notes already. People should go and join us on that phone call. We'll be trying to encourage people to join the organization, to up their dues to solidarity dues to help the DSA continue to grow and thrive. But without further ado, let's get over this conversation.
Oh yeah, and I just want to say sorry, my Google Chrome is absolutely not allowing me to stream right now. But yeah, just I know David already talked about it. My mom, he probably went into it a little bit. My mom, farming side, they were all Democrats until the Democrats decided we.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is a path forward, both looking through history and looking towards the future. I will bring us into this conversation, folks. We'll be back on the other side, and we'll get Matt's stuff figured out. Enjoy.
Welcome, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Lech, in for David Griscom. And joining me today, Devin Thomas O'Shea. He's the author of 2026's The Veiled Prophet, which gets into some of the cultish, shadowy elite of St. Louis, which I'm excited to read about. Also, you can find his writing in The Nation, Slate, Protein Mag, Jacobin, etc. Devin, I've also noticed you on TikTok. To kind of introduce yourself for the purposes of this conversation, what are you doing over on TikTok?
Yeah, on TikTok. Well, first, it's a huge honor to be on Left Reckoning. I am a hat owning merch endorser of Left Reckoning. On TikTok, I've been doing sort of like breakdowns of Pynchon stuff, sort of revolving around something I wrote for LitHub not long ago. But also, this is the year of the pinch. This is like, we're going to have the Paul Thomas Anderson movie that's going to come out, that's kind of already out in places. And then a new Pynchon novel, Shadow Ticket, which some people have gotten advanced copies of. Have you seen people bragging about that?
No, but I am very jealous to hear that.
I am too. One of the local bookstore owners got it, read the whole thing already, and said, like, it's really good. It's in the same vein as like Inherent Vice and Vineland, and that's like the last 30 pages are like Pynchon at his best. So,
well, let's talk about that. So why are guys like you and I into Thomas Pynchon? I haven't read everything by Pynchon. I don't think I've read V. But I have done the big ones. I've done Grant V's Rainbow. I've done Mason Dixon's my favorite book of all time, I would probably say. Against the Day, I've got about a halfway through that one. Vineland is one of the more accessible Pynchons, just in terms of like runtime, I would say. It's not an entirely straightforward book. You still have a lot of Pynchon sort of technical writing. He calls shit hitting the fan feco-ventilatory collision at one point. But yeah, why do people like Thomas Pynchon?
That's like a great question, because there is sort of the stereotypical lit bro, like, people who are into big, ambitious books and like aren't intimidated by difficult writing. Like Vineland really is, it is accessible, and it is sort of like a more of an entry level one. It's still like a challenging as fuck book to like map out structure wise and like figure out like, okay, what happened exactly here? He does, if you read any Pynchon, he is kind of trying to shake you off on like, he'll just heel turn in the middle of a paragraph and like, well, okay, that conversation's over and they're heading away already before you realize, oh, the scene is changing. And I think like the challenge is definitely part of the appeal, but also the big appeal for me, and the reason that I've been doing TikToks that are sort of like just talking about Pynchon in like a really accessible way, is because he is like the historian or a fiction literary voice of the left. Like, especially in Vineland, there's a very deliberate like lineage in the protagonists of like recovering and talking about left history and like poeticizing it and sort of taking our postmodern moment and like putting history into it. So you're doing this very Frederick Jameson activity by trying to decode like a Pynchon novel. How did you first enter the pinch? Was it through a lit class?
I think it was Open Yale did Crime of Lot 49
That was me too, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that it was probably the book that stuck with me the most out of that sort of histories. And the thing that is always like what I like about Pynchon is he's sort of grappling in all of his books with, I think, something that is being widely felt for the first time in my life, which is people trying to come to grips with what sort of a beast we are on the back of when it comes to America. Whether it's Mason Dixon, which takes place in the 1700s with the two cartographers or mappers, Mason and Dixon, as they realize, wait, we're not just doing this for scientific reasons, all the way to, Vineland here, which is, like you say, we have the main, so it's just a little bit of chronology here. Vineland came out in 1990 or 1989, somewhere around there. It's set in 1984 with lots of flashbacks, with a lot of action happening in the late 60s with the sort of radical protest movements, but also going back into the Hollywood blacklist era, and sort of, but with a lot of sort of meditation on oh, we're in a time of reaction now. There's a Nixonian reaction that sort of ricochets into Reaganite reaction, and which made it, I think, really appropriate reading for our current times with Trumpism.
Yeah, that's like, I think that's the best entry point to Vineland is like the entire novel is set in motion because of Reaganite cuts to the federal government, and that like basically there's a bunch of people who are in witness protection or some sort of like hiding because of the FBI, and suddenly they're findable. And so then you get Zoid Wheeler and Prairie Wheeler are sort of the first two protagonists, and Zoid is like this cartoon character hippie who's living in the redwoods, where they filmed Return of the Jedi, and he has to once a year jump through a window in order to collect his what kind of check is that? It's like it's like a disability check.
Yeah.
For being crazy, for being out of his mind. And so he has to prove every year that he's out of his mind and jump through a window. And also that's a way that we find out later that Brock Vond, who's like the evil, FBI sort of DEA agent who's keeping an eye on everything. That's a way for Brock to keep an eye on where Zoid is. And so Prairie's mother, Zoid's love interest, is sort of Phoenice, and she has this relationship with Brock Vond, and then they are like she's back in the picture suddenly because of these Reaganite cuts. But the way that Pynchon talks about it is like all of this stuff is suddenly unraveling. All these ramifications of the rapidly shrinking federal government are just like set off this, like you're saying, age of reaction.
Right, like all of this infrastructure with informants and prosecutors that was set up sort of to deal with the radicalism of the 60s in particular. And even like, back to the 50s with the Red Scare and that sort of stuff. All of that is becoming too expensive. And the Reagan, sort of incoming Reagan administration decides to clean houses. So one of the early things is, I can't remember if it's Zoid or Phoenice who's told like, you're no longer in the computer, or maybe it was Zoid is told that Phoenice's like not even in the computer. And this is again 1990. That the technological element to this book, I believe there's even discussions of like simulation theory. There's a whole lot of concern about what computers mean and what it means when people become entered in these sort of databases as ones and zeros. That's, I mean, shocking to read a book that came out in 1990 doing that.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it is shocking, and he is known as somebody who was doing like disclosure through high literature at the time he was publishing. There's stuff in like Gravity's Rainbow that just, like Operation Paperclip, that just wasn't talked about when that published, which was 17 years before Vineland came out. So maybe another good piece of context is just that like when Vineland comes out in 1990, it's a big disappointment because everybody is thinking that there's another giant tome is going to like hit, just like Gravity's Rainbow, which is about World War II and the Nazis and anti-fascism and also the tarot and worshiping death and shit like that. But then Vineland hits, and it's very readable, and it's about like the contemporary moment. Like, it is about the Reagan era and this computerization, and just like, it seems like he's probably closer in Vineland to making a like comment on the present day than he usually is, and like Mason and Dixon or like any of the other big ones.
Right. And, you know, just talk about Pynchon, famously reclusive guy, hasn't made a public appearance in decades, except I guess if you count the Simpsons episode that he does a voice for. Basically wrote Gravity's Rainbow. When did Gravity's Rainbow come out? Was that in the 50s or 60s?
I think that was in 70, like, it was like 73 or 4, somewhere around there.
Right, 17 years. That's right. So it was that long in between that writing. And Pynchon's early biography was he was a technical report writer for like the military industrial complex, which explains, I think, sort of a little bit his insight in and sort of sensitiveness to what the military industrial complex is doing and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he goes to Cornell, and some people say that he like studied with Nabokov, but probably didn't. But he also joins the Navy, comes back, finishes his degree in literature, sells this like short story, his first one, for like what is today something like $12,000 or something like that, like a huge check. And he uses that to go finish V while he's a technical writer for Boeing. And he's working on rockets that have nuclear warheads attached to the top of them that are going to be stored in secretive SAM sites all across North America in order to shoot a nuclear weapon at like a fucking Soviet bomber squad and like just fill the sky with a nuclear explosion. Like one of the more demented strategies of the 50s for like the Cold War insanity.
Who needs sort of a targeted approach? Just blow up the entire sky.
Yeah, what if we just fill the atmosphere with nuclear fallout? Who cares? It was going to happen anyway, you know? And so I think a ton of that just made its way, obviously, into Gravity's Rainbow. But there's also, you know, California is like a big thing for Pynchon, and like Vineland is called one of the California novels, in line with The Crying of Lot 49 and Inherent Vice, as like California, like in Vineland, is pretty explicitly says that like Vineland is sort of this utopian spot that is the culminated imagination of what California was supposed to be from like the 1800s forward, of like the place at the edge of the frontier with abundance and a like possible new way of like living in greater community, or just like not as frenetically oppressed as like Europe. And that like there's something about California also being outfitted with all of the military industrial, you know, equipment that is part of the Pynchon metaphor of like paradise. I think there's also a place in Vineland where it talks about a bunch of the hippies in hiding in the upper part of California that's surrounded by military shit. And so there's like nuclear disposal sites and like aircraft launch pads and stuff like that. And the hippies are sort of quietly hiding in the valley between them.
Yeah, the proximity of all these different types of forces, like the College of the Surf is like right between two extremely conservative sort of enclaves. It also talks about, I mean, it's pretty scary stuff, like sort of secretive installations ready to house 10,000 people that they're going to disappear in case Reagan decides to invade Nicaragua, that sort of stuff.
What did you think of that section? Because I thought that was remarkable when we were like, oh, we're going to go to like an abandoned, I guess, nuclear fallout section. Basically saying like, if we're talking about the same part where he's like, where they're talking about the concern and how we can house this in the day where they come to get everybody, right? And they're all sort of worried about that. It does feel like, I mean, this current administration is sort of this sort of paranoia about Jade Helm being sort of, oh, we're just going to make Alligator Alcatraz now, and never mind that people go missing from there. And actually, you know, I mean, that part reminded me exactly of what we're seeing. There's this Alligator Alcatraz shit where there's people missing now. Yeah. There's a point where Brock Vaughn, the sort of evil prosecutor that's sort of the main antagonist here, he's asked about their raid on this college. And he said they went underground. And people are thinking like, well, what do you mean they went underground when you don't have any sort of bulletins trying to capture them? And it's clear that he's saying, oh, we killed them. Right. And just like the double entendre of like, oh yeah, the College of the Surf, in order to like, this is such a weird metaphor that's like baked into the center of the novel, which is that Fernese, back when in the height of the 60s, is entangled with this 24 FPS, like a film clique of like radicals who are going to film the fascism happening in America, especially as like the Nixon administration cracks down. And there's sort of this math professor named Weed Atman, who is the embodiment of all of the sort of left hippie SDS like gurus, or like maybe even Herbert Marcose or somebody like that, who gets this sudden call, like gathering of hippies that are listening to him, and the university cedes from the United States formally and becomes the nation of rock and roll, as you know you do in a Pynchon novel. And then the culmination of the novel is that Fernese has already started this affair with Brock Vond, who supplies her with a pistol and says that she has to like make Weed Admin go away. And then that pistol ends up in the hands of this other hippie who is, I wanted to ask you about this too. He's obsessed with a Bolshevik group in the USSR that was like liquidated during the revolution or something like that.
Was that the Vietnamese?
That was it.
Yeah. And he also has a dispute with weed because he thinks you should get more and more ascetic and give up more and more, sort of life's luxuries. And Weed says that's a little bit pessimistic, don't you think? And he says, well, I don't see you giving anything up. And it's like, that's not the point I was making.
Right. Which, I mean, it's just like that you can see the similar sort of disagreements in how exactly to organize the left. And it comes down to Weed versus Rex, and Rex domes Weed during this like big Fed invasion of the campus. And then, as you were saying, all of these kids get disappeared, and Brock says, oh, they went underground, like the Weather Underground or something like that. But they literally are transported away out of the campus into a gigantic fallout shelter that was built by like the Kennedy administration. And on their way there, it's like a highway that is built to have traffic completely stopped on it in this like apocalyptic way. And then there are signs every so often with pictures of like anti-communist activists that are supposed to like assure the people going into the bunker that like, I don't know, the capitalist mode will continue even onto the other side of Armageddon. And that's where Fernese ends up. That's where she has to get broken out of by one of the other protagonists, DL, who is like a ninja. And that sounds crazy because that's like a crazy way to plot a thing, but that's just like, that's the plot of the novel, you know?
Yeah, it's sort of classic Pynchon zaniness. And just to let people paint the picture a little bit, in this movie coming up, One Battle After Another by Paul Thomas Anderson, who has adapted Pynchon before with Inherent Vice, which I really enjoyed.
Me too.
The character names are all different in this, which I believe is I think Inherent Vice was pretty faithful to the actual characters. But DiCaprio will be playing the sort of Zoid Wheeler character, and Tiana Taylor probably the Fennessy Gates character now it's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about Fennessy, who's in that 24 frames per second collective, the film collective that's going to basically use cameras as a weapon against fascism. Her characters, she ultimately collaborates with Brock Vond, the prosecutor, for reasons kind of sexual in nature. And I did watch the movie Baby Girl starring Nicole Kidman this weekend. So similar sort of power fetishism going on there, that Fernese blames her mother for sort of giving her. And the story is really about, it starts with Zoid and Prairie, his daughter, with Fernese. They're apart because of this sort of Brock Vond conspiracy that she collaborated with. And so the sort of main action in this is really or the main character I would say is Prairie trying to come into contact with her mother.
Right.
And then there's the irony of Brock coming down and saying, "I am your father," in the same woods that it's mentioned Star Wars was filmed in. But that's just to sort of give people the main characters. And I would say Prairie is probably, very touchingly, I think there's sort of critiques you can make about maybe the Frenesy character and the sexuality element of it. And definitely some critique can be made of Takeshi and the sort of the stylization of the Asian characters' dialogue. But I would say Prairie is a really touching representation of a young woman who hasn't met her mother and sort of only knows her through stories told by these sort of aging radicals.
Yeah, she's like, also interestingly, there's a lot of like the dialectic happening in the novel, or just like the way that Pynchon thinks is like very dialectical. So Zoid Wheeler and Frenesy or Frenzy. How do you pronounce it? I don't know if I'm doing it right. I've only
the audiobook goes Frenesy.
Frenesy. Okay. So I apologize, but Frenesy and Zoid are sort of like the hippie paragons, and then they birth into the 80s Prairie, who is like more of a punk. So she's like a synthesis of the destroyed 60s movement that is still anti-authority, pushing into, it reminds me a lot of Terminator, and just like the way that, and especially Terminator 2, of like the kids are like fleeing from, authority and like the cops. They was just like, I think that encapsulated a moment. But yeah, Prairie's depiction is very, I think, good. I think also Pynchon was like becoming more family oriented while he was writing this. But we got to point out that like, this is definitely a book where you start reading it and you're like, man, this guy is like really horny for like a chick who like kicks ass, or just like the mode of empowering women is through like almost has to be violence, or just like making DL, one of the other characters, into like a ninja. And even Frenesy is like, she's a badass, gonna confront fascism with a camera. And that
certainly comes through in the trailer to One Battle After Another, with Teyana Taylor just sort of like walking down guys with missile launchers and stuff like that.
That's the weird thing. Like, I haven't gotten the opportunity to see any more of it than the trailer, but like, there's a lot more guns happening in the movie than in the book at all. There's sort of,
Yeah, I'm curious I was a little bit, until I heard that it was Paul Thomas Anderson, I was a little bit worried about it, because I don't know if the modern setting makes a lot of sense, or how they will make that make sense, because this is so like, Prairie was born in the like early 70s, right after the radical period, like, and then we're just not in the same sort of time period, right? Like, would Prairie be born in like the Clinton time? I mean, maybe it can be done to make sense, but yeah, I was curious about that part of it. And again, like how action oriented they make it.
Yeah, because there's like, when the events of Vineland are happening, it's like the height of the anti-drug Reagan push. And so that like really makes sense that there's like on the ground fascists like burning weed crops and using it as a excuse to jail lots of people. And that feels very in tandem with ICE and immigration, and just the way that, it's so, one of the weird things about reading is like, I wonder what he would think about how the drug problem solved itself in the early 2000s when we just legalized most of marijuana, and like how that's like not usable anymore. And so now we've sort of like turned on immigration as the thing that is empowering the state to do like direct violence, to become more fascistic. It's a strange, because like you're saying, you hop over basically the 90s of like complete apolitical, Clinton neoliberal calm waters.
Yeah. And, I think it's interesting the view Pynchon has, which I think is pretty vindicated, where there's the phrase, I can't find it here, scabland garrison state. But they're talking about basically like, it mentions actually Anslinger, the sort of precursor to Hoover, who was the guy who, according to Johann Hari's book, was when I first saw this, Chasing the Scream, but he was the guy who's like, I don't like all this jazz and these black people like smoke and stuff. We can go after them with the pot thing. And, I remember reading like the book and drug war books in like the mid 2010s and stuff. And they would write that as if it's news. And here it's in a Pynchon novel in 1990 that Anslinger was that guy. But really there's a point where it's like, if we're not locking people up, what point's the government? Like, and so it sort of this idea that, I mean, really, our government is a reactionary. Oh, there it is. Scabland, garrison state. They're talking. It's Mucho Mas, who is actually a character from A Crime of Lot 49, makes his appearance. Says Zoid and Mucho are talking. I'm not going to forget, the sort of struggle. Basically, fuck them. While we had it, we had some fun. And Mucho says, and they never forgave us. Mucho went to the stereo and put on the best of Sam Cooke, volumes 1 and 2. They had to get a listen. The unseen play. Though outside spread the lampless wastes, the unseen paybacks, the heartless power of the scabland garrison state. The green free America of their childhoods, even then, was turning into. And it's such a good book like that. Like, I think of John Milton writing Paradise Lost after he was a revolutionary in the 1600s and the restoration of the king happened, and he had to sort of watch himself a little bit because he was a minister in Cromwell's government arguing on, among other things, that we have the right to kill kings, and writing Paradise Lost at that time of sort of restoration and reaction. It's interesting to see how sort of common that experience is throughout the time.
Yeah, that you can use the story of the devil to like basically convey a pretty complex and submerged political message. I mean, I think that is what's really appealing in Pynchon is like, I feel like when people first encounter it, maybe in college, they're like, oh yeah, there's like a conspiracy and you want to get to the bottom of it. And like, we're not really sure what it is. It's debated in literature, but it's like, well, not really. The thing that's being debated is like the history of working people and working people like conspiring together to like wield power. That happens like over and over again in Vineland, but just in every Pynchon conspiracy. At the bottom of it is always like some sort of revolutionary light being kindled and like kept alive, even in. And I don't know. Did you find Vineland to be optimistic, or like it felt somewhat lighthearted, or like looking forward to the future?
So at the end, the part I alluded to earlier where Brock Vaughn, the prosecutor, descends from a helicopter and says to Prairie, I am your father. And Prairie basically says like, we have different blood types. Your blood type is preparation H, which is a very 80s joke, I think.
Absolutely.
And then ultimately Brock has like in the middle of that gesture is pulled away because the Reaganite cuts hit even the chopper that is carrying him. And then there's like, I think maybe I misunderstood the end, but he dies, right? So I do think like that part was sort of, I think, optimistic that even like the sort of structure, the sort of nefarious structure is sort of foiled by quotidian budgetary reasons that you could hear about. Like it's funny, like I think there's a kid early in the book where everyone's freaking out about what's happening and why are my checks not clearing from the government as an informant. And the kid says, you just need to watch the whatever hour. It wasn't Charlie Rose, but just placeholder, whatever was Charlie Rose back then. You just watch that. It's all of Reagan budget stuff.
Right.
And it's hard though, because I don't know that necessarily. Well, let's kind of talk about the Thanatoids and what what they represent, because that might maybe if I understand that a little bit better, they'll change my position on this. But the Thanatoids are basically half dead people that are like sort of arose after Vietnam. Is that right?
Yeah, they're like, or I think they're related to the television. So there's also like, there's something about the Thanatoids that is based in like TV. I read it, or we can maybe link to it afterwards, but there's a very good like academic essay that's about the Thanatoids and how they work in Vineland. And basically this author, his name is, I'll have to look it up, but he argues pretty persuasively that, like, theoretically in the book of Vineland, there is, like, no such thing as, like, death, really, or at least there's, like, a bardo, this, like, in-between stage between death and rebirth that is sort of opened up, and that the Thanatoids are, like, ghostly manifestations of something to do with television, but they've been wronged, and they're sort of lingering around. There's, like, a couple passages where Thanatoids are talking about how if you hang around somebody having sex, you might like step in on just the right moment and be reborn. You can like enter back into the karmic cycle that way. And that like the like weed admin becomes a Thanatoid because he gets betrayed by Rex on the college campus. And so he's sort of lingering around. But they are also depressed, and they're like can't affect anything, and they also maybe get liberated at the end. There's like a moment of Bach that like wakes up all of the Thanatoids.
Yeah, so Weed Atman, he is the guy who is sort of set up to be killed by Frenesy. And yeah, that and that killing is caught on video, because that's the whole sort of point of the collective. Right. And there's a moment where it's described that he shudders, and I think that is like probably him becoming a Thanatoid too. And then, but he gets his head blown off after that anyway. But he still becomes again this sort of Thanatoid. These people who live in giant apartment blocks and just watch TV and build resentment. It is. I mean, the anxiety over communications technology is always something I found interesting with Pynchon, and the television stuff in this is I think really at a time where like Neil Postman's writing about like amusing ourselves to death. Very interesting sort of reading.
And Pynchon is a famous Luddite, like an embracer of, wanting to have worker control over technology. So like, I think it's Prairie's grandfather who is in ITAS, the electrical lighting for Hollywood union. And Pynchon also has this whole thing with lights where the shadows and sort of the in-between stages of light and dark are like dusk and dawn. It's like kind of where we can get a little spooky sometimes. But like, I do think the Thanatoids have something to do with the fiction that has like infected everybody's like worldview, that there's like that television has like changed America in a way where everyone is sort of experiencing their own fictionalized version of reality. And that like this book, again, 1990, is talking about like the elimination of consensus reality. And that like at the end, Brock Vond, like as if he's in a sitcom, gets like pulled straight out from a Deus ex machina of like, well, we're done with that. And he goes away. And then it's very confusing because then he lands the helicopter. The government says, we're not doing that anymore. And he gets back in the helicopter with a gun and is like going to lift off. And then it's just implied that he dies because then he enters a dream sequence where he's got his car stuck, and then the two sort of representatives of the boatmen of River Styx go and pick him up and take him to be a Thanatoid, basically, or dead. Not sure.
And another thing sort of related to the technology thing is, and this kind of seemed, I don't know why this made me think of phones, but there's these parrots that all of a sudden like come out of nowhere and all speak English with the same peculiar accent that no one knows, no one can place. And they tell stories about jaguars and monkeys, and the coming of humans and the disappearance of trees. Like, it's such a weird, and Pynchon does this a lot. Like, he's got like a talking dog, or like a duck robot. Is it in
the duck robot has always been very mysterious to me in Mason and Dixon.
Yeah, there's like these weird things where there's talking sentient creatures.
Yeah, the duck flies up and down the Mason-Dixon line, right? Like, and it was invented by a chef or something, a French chef. And
it's based on like a real sort of fake thing. And there's also a talking dog in Mason and Dixon as well. But yeah, these parrots that like, and then the kids are, and maybe this is a different part. Maybe this isn't the actual parrots, but other birds perching in palm trees. And when the commercial's on, the birds sing the commercials with the television, like very strange media stuff going on here.
Yeah, like full breaks in reality. Like what you would otherwise, it's so weird to me that like Pynchon isn't really like understood as magical realism, but he is a magical realist. He's like, everybody always calls him a postmodernist, but I think that like does a disservice to like, no, dude, he's just like creating reality and then breaking the structures for usually narrative reasons, or like to make a point maybe about this fictionalized present that everybody lives in. There's also the like weird Ghostbusters thing with the living, what's it called? Multitude bake or whatever, variety loaf. That is like, it's in a live, this is in like the back of a freezer of a monastery full of nuns that know karate. And it's a loaf of sentient biomatter that like has like prairie interacts with for some reason.
Yeah, and there's like even like a rights thing where it says if it glows, it's alive, and very you wonder where his head was at in some of these passages, because there's sort of, I mean, zany is a funny word that is commonly applied to Pynchon, but it does seem like a mix of a sort of cartoon, Warner Brothers style zaniness mixed with a deep material and political history of this country is sort of what you get with Pynchon.
Yeah, it is like, I mean, that is the weird thing. This is also the thing that I'm continuously attracted to is like, well, you can't ever figure him out. He's very intentionally, there's a whole history of Pynchon and how he's hooked up to the Academy, and that there's like tons of people are always watching when he publishes something and they want to figure it out and get to the bottom of it. But it is zany or crazy enough that it like refuses to be totally understood. And that's like part of the staying power, is that it's like, you can't pick all of this stuff together because it's contradictory and sort of being told to you by this like Pynchon himself in the narrator's like voice and imagination. Wallace said after this came out, he was like, I think he's just been smoking too much pot, but I don't know. All the other stuff he wrote is kind of just as zany or cartoony. Yeah,
I mean, this is not, there are parts in Gravity's Rainbow where I'm like, I probably need to be on some kind of psychedelic to fully understand what is even being approached here. This stuff read from the distance, I guess 35 years after it was written. Anybody following sort of the increasing acceptance of a term like fascism being applied to America, like this sort of thing, I think is really important, because I think there's a worry that I have is people are just going to individualize this as this is Donald Trump, or even like this is just, even like the financial crisis of 2008, like actually the crisis we're in has a pretty long lead up. And actually like precedent in this country. that, has been representative even in fiction.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I can't overstate how my chipping away into history to find left stuff kind of has pivoted off of Pynchon fiction. Like Against the Day was like my favorite novel. I really wanted to do a PhD or something on it, and thank God I fucking didn't. But it's it is preserving this moment in history of the Wobblies and the ascendant labor movement at the turn of the century in the Gilded Age. And you can pattern out here through Pynchon's work, the precursor to that in Mason-Dixon, the thing that comes after in the 30s, I guess Shadow Ticket will give us that. And then obsessively covering the 60s from a number of different books, but just these waves of left resurgence and how this is a continuous struggle. There's a through line. I think that's the most beautiful thing about Vineland is that it is about Prairie coming to understand her place in a history of worker liberation struggle. And as that the joke, she says, the refusal, she pulls out a buck knife also when Brock Vaughn comes down. And it's it's a anti-fascist action to refuse to be interpolated into whatever his thing is of being Darth Vader's daughter, even if she is, which is also, I don't know, there's something really beautiful in Pynchon when he gets really poetic and he starts talking about light and the people who have been trodden on and crushed by capital, and how we all kind of owe an allegiance to the sacrifices of the past. I think that's when he gets really, really good,
Shadow Ticket's set in the 30s?
30s in Wisconsin, which also I'm oh shit, Midwest. All right.
Damn.
Midwest Pynchon joint. I don't know.
That's fascinating. Well, we'll have to get you back on for that when it drops this fall.
I would love to. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Devin, where can people follow your work?
I'm on everything at Devin T. O'Shea. Instagram, TikTok. Follow my TikToks. Talked about Warlock, which have you ever picked up Warlock, man?
I am a very big Oakley Hall head. Warlock and Badlands. And actually, it is through Pynchon, actually, I'm remembering.
Oh, really?
He was a big fan of Warlock, right?
Exactly. Is Badlands just as good?
Badlands is awesome. Well, I'm partial to Badlands because that's sort of Montana based. So it's but yeah, Badlands is fucking awesome, and so is Warlock. Too great. If you have a dad who's into westerns, slip that into the maybe the stocking this Christmas.
The ending of Warlock is so explosively good. It's such a good payoff.
Not to go too deep, we could do a whole episode of Warlock, but Warlock is a type of book. It's set in Wild West town. Is it Wyatt Earp? Is that who it's based on? Wyatt Earp, or just Butch Cassidy or something? One of those sort of lawman guys.
Yeah.
But every line of that, it does, and I think Melville has this sort of thing, and but it seems so like you're writing mythology instead of fiction in some kind of way. It's awesome.
Yeah, just the core archetype of American unconscious, sort of battling it out, and but not commenting on it in any way. It's just a straightforward Western.
Exactly.
So
well, Devin, thanks so much, man. I've really enjoyed talking to us about you.
Thank you so much for having me. Seriously, Left Reckoning, an all-timer. I'm very proud to have been a guest. I hope I get to come back.
Of course. Appreciate it.
Really great. Nice hearing you talk literature, Matt.
Appreciate you letting me get a little bit indulgent with there, David. I was planning maybe a little half-hour discussion, and of course, could have gone on for a lot longer. I almost went 45 more minutes on Oakley Hall at the end.
No, I mean, it is super interesting. I'll have to check out the movie, actually. I've been looking for something good to watch. It might be worth, sorry, man, I know you're having a million issues. It might be worth double checking that you're coming through the right microphone. If not, we can rock with this. But no, I mean, definitely really good to be able to kind of jump in to all of these subjects, because we kind of really fucked up political scene right now. And I think being able to take a moment to have a long view and engage with kind of literature and thought is critical at this moment, because I do think that the kind of immediacy of existence that we're going through right now is certainly like a major factor in the kind of general political neuroses that most people are experiencing, right? And being able to, like, I don't know, break out of that cycle is good, and it's nice to be able to do that on this program. No, they can't hear you at all. Well, while you do that, I'm gonna get us introduced to this UK story, if that works for you, Matt, because we have this story here, and this is something that we've covered a little bit on this program, right? Which is the United Kingdom, Jeremy Corbyn, and the very, very exciting things that had happened in there. I mean, we were on TMBS. We covered the kind of Corbyn revolution within the Labour Party. We were very excited about all of that. And, we've kind of gone through it all the way now to the other side, where Corbyn has been kind of out of power for a bit. Let me see if we can fix this here, and hopefully Matt's able to go. But we were really excited about this. We were excited about your party, which was announced in kind of difficult and odd circumstances, to be fair. But it was something that was really, we were very hopeful here on this program. And I think a lot of my other friends across the US left, and certainly in the UK, were excited as well about. But unfortunately, it has been something of a disaster, and hopefully we can get it fixed. Are you here, Matt? Are you able to? You're muted.
Oh, how's this?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, let's get into this. So we're going to get into this your party story. I mean, if you want to say anything up at the top, though, go for it. Because I mean, we were both pretty excited about this, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what happened over this past week, because it moved pretty quickly.
Yeah, it actually, when it first announced, was looking into getting a guest to talk about this, and
yeah, that's true.
It kind of fell apart
Maybe
immediately.
somebody pictured here.
A little bit of a wobble. Well, I mean, Jeremy would be great. Also, just people around that sort of constellation, and it's difficult, because I think, like, I've seen certain criticisms made by Sultana of Corbyn, particularly along, don't give in to bad faith smears and that sort of thing, which, is something that we've been saying here for a long time. The sequencing of this, there's been like sort of two sort of moments of, I guess, disarray, as the political press likes to call it. And, we definitely don't like to see that.
No, we don't. Yeah, let me give everybody a little bit of the narrative here, because again, as we're saying, like, so Keir Starmer has been ruining the Labour Party. He took away the whip from Jeremy Corbyn. This is somebody who has been firmly committed to some of the worst versions of austerity, to the mass slaughter of children in Gaza. Keir Starmer is probably as slimy a political operative as they come, and he's hated. He's hated all across the United Kingdom and all across the globe, rightfully so. So there's questions about what will come next. And the big fear is that it will be something that, just like in the United States, where the failure of the Democratic Party has only emboldened the most dangerous far-right anti-democratic forces in the Republican Party and the right in this country, the same thing has been happening in the United Kingdom. And there's tremendous worry about what this is going to mean. So Corbyn has the whip removed from him, which effectively means he's like no longer a member of the Labour Party. And, there have been questions about whether or not he would start his own political organization, or whether or not he was just going to kind of operate as an independent MP. And over the summer, there were a lot of conversations that we were hearing, both public and private, that there was going to be a political party that was going to be launched. And when it was announced that there would be a new political party led by Jeremy Corbyn and Sultana, people were ecstatic. People in the United Kingdom and also in this country, because there's a desperate need and appetite for a new political movement. And despite a kind of wonky rollout, an undefined name, your party, people across the United Kingdom and all across the globe are very excited that this might mean, significant change. And then time went on. Things got murky. There was a lot of talk, a lot of time passed, and questions about what will the new name be, which is kind of ridiculous, frankly, to be spending all this time waiting around for a name for a political party, how it should be structured, will there be a kind of convention, all of this, and what is taking so long. Well, last week, things moved pretty quickly and in an unfortunate direction. So we get this. Zara shared this on Twitter last week. We said this was your party and we meant it. We have just launched our membership and there's a link. Now, people noted that this link didn't go to the website that was already had been associated with your party. And just to remind folks about how excited people were and how much momentum there was around your party, this is an organization that had 800,000 signups after it announced, right? And you were seeing the polls, like there were around 20% of voters were saying that they would consider voting for this new political party, right? So there's all this time going on. There's all this excitement and all this question. Hey, when is it really going to launch? Like you have a sign up, but it's effectively just like a mailing list, right? So then this comes out last week and was actually calling for membership, people to pay dues to the organization. But almost immediately there's question marks because, as I said, it's linking to something outside of the website. And then you start getting statements from people like Jeremy Corbyn and other independent MPs associated with the organization saying this morning an unauthorized email was sent to your party UK supporters with details of a supposed membership portal hosted in a new domain name. Legal advice is being taken. And I think most people at this point know that now we're having this public row about whether or not Zara was acting in the right here. And you're getting questions that, and statements from Jeremy Corbyn and other MPs that they're going to consider taking legal action over this. So you get claims saying, hey, this is fraudulent. Don't click the link, right? Tremendous confusion. And remember here that like people are being asked for money. At the end of the day now, I believe there are 20,000 supporters who paid 55 pounds for full membership, over the weekend. So already people have kind of exchanged money here. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of question marks going on. So Corbyn and these folks basically accuse Zara of running and operating this without their permission, without the permission of the organization. As you saw there, Jeremy Corbyn and the other folks said that they were considering taking legal action. Zara comes out and with the statement saying that like defending herself and saying that she was acting in the right and that what is happening behind the scenes in the party is that it's being operated as a sexist boys club, meaning effectively that she has been sidelined from decision-making roles, or at least she's not feeling that her voice was being heard within the organization. She then followed and said, over the last 24 hours, a number of false and defamatory statements have been published about me concerning the launch of your party's membership portal. The portal was properly launched in accordance with the party's roadmap. And we'll get into all the nitty-gritty of this in a second. All funds received from members were ring-fenced and protected in the appropriate manner. To that end, I have this evening instructed specialist defamation lawyers to avoid prejudicing or complicating any further legal process. I will not be making any further comments about this matter at this time. So you have here now the supposed leaders of this new political party that literally nearly 1 million people are so excited to join up with and join up in, basically accusing each other of serious crimes and getting lawyers involved, and also in this case publicly tweeting this shit out, tweeting this kind of shit out, right? And it was a total disaster. It was a total disaster. And everybody is asking for them to slow down, shut up, and maybe talk to each other instead of airing this out publicly, embarrassing the political movement, probably poisoning the opportunity to build something else up. Now, Eventually, there is some kind of daylight here. Zara says, over the past few days, I've spoken with comrades across our movement for the sake of the party and as an act of good faith. I will not be pursuing legal proceedings despite the baseless and unsubstantiated allegations against me. I'm determined to reconcile and move forward. The party does not belong to any of us. It belongs to you. And she says, I am determined to reconcile and move forward. I am engaged in ongoing discussions with Jeremy, for whom, like all socialists of my generation, have nothing but respect. And yeah, so they're in conversations now. The latest that we've heard, it seems like they are going to push a kind of membership drive. But as you can see, I mean, this is something that's not going to be very easy to put away. And while they have been having conversations, sources close to Jeremy Corbyn have said, that this whole episode, has revealed a severe lack of trust between Jeremy and Zara in particular. And I can take us through some of the kind of factors and factions behind the scenes here and maybe get to the bottom of what actually happened. But I wanted to throw to you, Matt.
I mean, part of it is, I think, my natural reaction to a lot of this stuff, or even like sort of inter-DSA stuff, is that people do need more tolerance for messiness, and that sort of stuff could be sort of part of the process. But it has to be dealt with better than this. Where
this isn't really a ringing endorsement for airing dirty laundry in public, right?
Where the immediate reaction, like, I'm not sure what because part of me is could sympathize with let's get this going mentality from Zara. That time is short. There's clearly so much energy. And what's going on in the UK, particularly with regards to nativism, unchallenged by any sort of opposition, is horrifying. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy to me how we can get like a right-wing Brexit and the economy can be continued to be fucked, like not improve at all. And then the same people just change the name of what they're doing and call it reform. And actually the problem is immigrants now, because there's a absolute vacuum on the left, because Keir Starmer and the purge of the party of Corbyn and people like Zara. It's just a shame we couldn't have gotten immediately to the point of, there was a bit of, we're not completely like synced up on how we launched this thing. I wish we could have got there before the sort of like, is this some sort of data harvesting theft attempt versus old sexist boys club? Like those sorts of accusations, I think are brutal, are really tough for a movement that has so much energy.
Yeah, and maybe to get to some of the nitty gritty here, just to like maybe our American audience, people who haven't been following this as closely. This isn't the first time that since this has come about that Zara has kind of like rushed forward to the public. In fact, the launch of the party, Zara kind of did it publicly before anybody else knew. So this was something that there was kind of under wraps, and Zara just announced it straight up. And apparently, as much if she did tell Jeremy Corbyn and others that she was going to do it, it was a kind of limited communique. So it was something that there's already kind of frustration with her kind of rushing and pushing things. And what you have here is it's fairly muddy, and two factions probably the wrong words, because even though this is supposed to be a mass political organization, most of this operating is happening very small groups. But yeah, as Matt was saying, like slow and tepid around Jeremy Corbyn. Corbyn, again, like didn't even want to launch really at the get-go. And now we have had months and tremendous excitement, and there hasn't been a lot of engagement with the base, which is absolutely wild, in a lot of ways political malpractice. And I can really understand why somebody like Zara was getting extremely frustrated with this as this is going on. You're literally potentially squandering like an almost 1 million member organization. That's incredible. That is incredible to squander.
In a country of like what, 40 million?
I mean, it'd be huge in the U.S., right? You know what I mean? Like almost a million people is like, larger than most real serious political organizations, in our history. And then, around Zara, there's this kind of like a lot of talk about democracy and participation and moving quickly. But again, what is the membership, right? When you're talking about participation and democracy and all this kind of stuff, I mean, yeah, but also it seems like, you're not feeling like you're having enough influence, and maybe you're right in the argument, but you're just kind of putting things out there in public and launching a membership drive on a separate website, and like, who knows about the legality? I'm no scholar of like British law or anything like that, but yeah, it's kind of funky. And you might think that this is a move to kind of push people to act. Well, you're right; they have acted, and it's created a massive embarrassment for this political organization. And it shows a lot of the challenges that we face in this country and in political movements throughout our history as socialists, right? One of the things about bottom up versus top down, this is one of the kind of clandestine arguments that you're hearing from people in the know, is that, there might be some kind of push to have this be more like politician run than membership run, right? Which, you can be kind of sympathetic to like people saying, oh, we want more democracy. But at the same time, how can you have a bottom up organization with something that from the get go was started from the top down, right? What is the party? What is the organization that you're fighting for? If it doesn't exist in the first place, right? What kind of appeals can you make to the membership for something that isn't in existence? In a lot of ways, like there does need to be some fucking leadership. And look, there will be a convention. As we said before, Zara and Jeremy Corbyn have both said, that they're moving forward, that they've talked, that they've reconciled, but they don't have a program and they don't have an agreement, right? So they're saying that they'll let this one go and they'll move forward, but there's a lot of major questions. There will be a convention. I worry about something like what happened in Chile, where a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity from the Chilean left to rewrite the constitution of Pinochet was squandered by kind of lunacy and idiocy and ultra-leftism. Activists made a complete mockery of one of the most important moments that country has seen.
Turning it into an activist wish list and then getting that rejected by the people.
100%.
Yeah. And by the way, I just want to correct myself real quick. It's closer to 70 million, not 40. I apologize to the UK.
Good live one. And I'll just say in closing, like, this is a moment where you need leaders, and in the United Kingdom, the people that they have, the people that the left have, just ain't acting like them.
Yeah. Hopefully the leaders here can get their act together a little bit more, because I don't know that necessarily we have. Look, hey, Bernie's come out, said he calls it genocide now. But like Zoran has to sort of create a model of his own for being the mayor, because these sorts of like muscles just haven't been exercised on the left enough, frankly, and it's a shame. And I mean, that's why the certain part of folks who want to be very methodical about it, like Corbyn, you can kind of understand that. But at a certain point, like, where is this going to come from?
One of the things, like, there's a lot from Corbyn, that I respect, but like the fact of the matter is, like, he completely was outmaneuvered politically.
Correct.
And I think, like, sometimes a lack of ruthlessness has been a huge issue for him. Once the Labour Party started rebelling against him, he should have been purging those people immediately, and he didn't. And now he's no longer a member of that organization, right? So, like, Corbyn has, I think, kind of bad political instincts, and I think more like organization, like the kind of things like the House of Cards shit, right? that everyone's kind of imagined politicians being good at. He just hasn't shown the capacity, to be able to do that. And I think, to be cautious in this moment is a real mistake. I think that really, you need to be strategic, and you don't just need to be like acting out upon every impulse that you have, sure. But to sit here and to not really engage this base when you had the opportunity to, I think is a tragic, historic mistake. And look, a lot of the conversations, sound like it's done. It's not. There has been, movements, I think, amongst, the 800,000 people who signed up, say like, hey, we want to take control of the party, and try to push for more bottom up grassroots, control of the organization. I mean, from what we've seen from the leadership, maybe that's a good thing. But again, it's like under whose authority, right? These are the big questions. And really, hopefully this is just a really strange opening chapter for something that will last a long time. It wouldn't be the first time that a political organization kind of, started off shaky and grew up.
Look at Reform. I mean, look at Reform. Reform has like literal coup attempts all the time with a rich guy saying like, I don't like Nigel Farage. I'm going to start my own. Like it's literally, I mean, and that's the thing is like, we talked about this with DSA a little bit. The reason DSA is, successful is in part because of all like, it's unmatched in terms of ability to get people on the streets, especially in cities like New York City. But also there's a certain degree of dysfunction and a disalignment within the organization, but fundamentally it's true. It's the economy, and if you care about things like democracy, you need to be a socialist. There's an imperative. It's physics. It's physics. You can't, and we'll get into this in the post.
Matt bringing back scientific socialism over here.
Exactly. Look, this is just, I've done the math, okay? And you can't do it this way. And so that's why, there is so much energy to sign up for this sort of stuff in the UK. It's why Zoran is able to win mayoral primary, because people are, and people also understand that a genocide is a genocide, and that, they can't fucking pay their rent with how much their boss gives them. These are physics. These are material questions that they're not going anywhere.
Well, the program's not over. We're just going over the post game. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning, where Matt has completely filled up.
I've lost my mind.
His computer, his auxiliary drive with clip after clip after clip of Kamala Harris. You've got to reward this hard work by signing up at Patreon.com/Left Reckoning to see what it was that he was doing.
I've broken my NVMe drive by
destroyed it,
ripping Kamala Harris videos off the internet.
So you're going to want to catch all of that. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Please, folks, there is a link right here in the show notes to sign up for our DSA phone bank. Please join us next Monday. There's a link below. It'd be really great if we had a lot of Left Reckoners out there calling up folks and getting involved in the work.
Have you phone banked before, David?
Yes, I have a few times. Have you?
First time I ever phone banked was Bernie Sanders, 2016, and nice. I remember he was speaking in New York that weekend, and instead of going there, me and my buddy Chris, we went to I'm not sure, it was someplace in Park Slope to do phone banking, and I remember calling, and all the people I called were like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to the Bernie rally tonight. I just got back from it," or something like that. It's pretty awesome to hear actual people excited about politics that we care about.
No, 100%. I mean, I did some here kind of a couple years back, and it was this really nasty proposition that was kind of used to by this kind of far right organization here that had won some stuff on like camping bans in the city, but they were really going too far on police budget stuff, and people were outraged, including a lot of Republican voters. And it was one of those things where you got those conversations with like an old guy, like, "Uh-oh, this is going to go poorly." But then it turns out they're like, "I think what they're doing is terrible. I think that they're lying to us." And I've been on Nextdoor telling everybody to vote against this Republican proposition. So you never know what you're going to get. But in this case, we're talking to the people in the movement and encouraging them to further support it. So please do join us for that phone bank next Monday. But yeah, we're not going anywhere. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We're going to turn the lights out on our freebie friends. Why don't you join us? become a patron, patreon.com/leftreckoning. And we're going to dive deep into all this Kamala Harris stuff that Matt has been sweating and working hard to get to. So I'll play some music out and then we can.
Sorry about that.
That's good. Play.
Here we are. See you, folks.